Let us pray. At the beginning of this week, we ask you, Father, to renew and strengthen in us the awareness of our duty and privilege as members of this legislature. We ask you also in your divine providence to bless and protect the Assembly and the province we are elected to serve. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Assembly distinguished visitors seated in your gallery. Mr. Speaker, we are favored today by a visit from the High Commissioner from the Commonwealth of Australia, our sister Commonwealth country, the Honourable His Excellency Robert Laurie and his wife Diana. Would they please rise and accept the warm welcome of the Assembly?
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce to you and through you to the members of the legislature 50 students from St. Damien School in good old Calgary, Milligan. And these students have traveled all the way from beautiful Calgary to be with us here today. And they, and they have with them two of their teachers, Pat Georges and Mr. Angelo Rizzuti. And they also have some of the parents, Peggy Furman and Mrs. Durant and Pat Labrie and Jan Mercer. And I wonder if they would rise and receive the warm welcome of the legislature.
Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce to you and through you to the rest of the Assembly members of the Alberta Beekeepers Association. Dale and Evelyn Philpott from Brooks have been in, the family's been in the honey business for over 70 years. Also from Brooks is Hank Dick, the Southern Director of the Alberta Beekeepers Association, and Stan Bastura is the President. Philpotts and Mr. Dick come from the Bow Valley constituency, and Mr. Bastura comes from the Tabor Warner. I would ask that they now stand and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly two individuals from the city of Fort McMurray. And they're seated in the members gallery, and it's Mrs. Ann Budd, who is a member of Akiano Board of Governors and the Local Economic Development Board. And along with Mrs. Budd today is Mr. Wayne Taylor, President of our Chamber of Commerce, and as well a member of the Local Economic Development Board. I would ask that they rise and receive the cordial welcome of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, this afternoon I wish to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Legislative Assembly 52 grade 6 students from the fine town of Rimbey. They are accompanied by their teachers, Miss Janet Henderson and Mr. Jim Moores, and parents and community members, Mrs. Dudewater, Mrs. Kendrew, Mrs. Adams, and Miss McConnell. They have visited the Space Sciences Center this morning and are concluding with a tour of the legislature. I'd like to ask them to now stand and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly. They are seated in the public gallery.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Energy, and it's a follow-up and an answer given to my colleague from Calgary Forest Lawn on June the 17th. And it has to do with regard to the increased use of cheaper imported crude in central Canadian markets. My question to the Minister is, what is the government's policy on pressing the federal government for some sort of guaranteed access for Western oil to Canadian markets?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member mentions the fact that there's a greater use of imported crude, and that's accurate. However, having gone the route of deregulation, the expectation of refineries is that they get the crude from the cheapest source. And so having gone that particular route, we do not at this particular time plan to take any action with regard to pressing the federal government in the matter.
Well, supplementary question to the Minister. In regard to losing that market and having to compete in the American market with very cheap prices there, is the Minister then saying that at this particular time that he will not even raise, say, the possibility of dividing the market again, say at the Ottawa Valley line, to ensure that we have some domestic markets for our oil here in the province?
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I do meet with my counterpart, the Honourable Pat Carney, in the coming week, we intend to discuss a number of issues related to the industry overall. However, the industry has been pressing, and it shows in the Energy Accord, the Western Accord, and the Natural Gas Agreement that they wanted to proceed down the road to deregulation. And the fact that we have a rise in the import of crude at the present time is a result of deregulation.
Well, certainly it's been down the proverbial road anyhow in terms of the Alberta industry since the Western Accord. My question then is that the continental oil policy that we now have, caused by deregulation the Minister's been alluding to, means frankly that independent producers are losing price, as we're well aware, but also losing the domestic market. And this is causing a flood into the American market at fireside prices, I might say, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister, what is the government's analysis of this situation, given that much of the increase recently in exports has occurred from valuable light crude, which I may say is in limited supply in Canada?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure of the general drift of all that the Honourable Leader has said or has asked. However, it is a fact that that even though imports are up, so are our exports to the United States. The overall desire of the industry is try to access the export market, particularly with regard to natural gas in the future. But in a deregulated system, the honourable member is implying that government should intervene. And that's not what the industry wants, nor is not what government wants.
I guess some of them don't matter if they go out of business. My simple question to the Minister, as I agree, that we've had an increase in the export market and a decrease in the Eastern Canadian market. But the prices that we're paying are fire sale prices. The Alaskan price is $2 less than what we pay here. And my question simply to the Minister, in the government's analysis, is this a healthy situation given that we have a limited supply of the light valuable crude?
I'm not sure what the honourable member would suggest that we do, Mr. Speaker, whether he's suggesting that we get back in and regulate what the price of crude should be. The world price of crude has gone down, and the prices that are being paid for are the commodity prices that are on the market. And I know that the opposition are suggesting that we get into the business of a floor price, but if they look at that closely, they'll see that it has implications as well. Not that we have suggested that we would eliminate the possibility of looking at it down in the future, but there certainly are many negatives to going that direction.
Supplementary member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. While I can understand his desire to punish the oil industry for asking them to deregulate the prices, I think he should cease and desist. And one of the things I'd ask the Minister, I'm getting to the point, even if it's only in your head right now, but I'd like to ask the Minister, Mr. Speaker, whether he will approach those oil companies that are importing oil in the offshore to at least guarantee the same amount of oil in the export market. The same people that are importing oil are also buying in the export market. In other words, let us at least guarantee, Mr. Speaker, that the amount of oil that's being imported is matched by the amount of oil being exported by Albertans.
Well, Mr. Speaker, here we are again with someone who's wanting guarantees to be built in. The industry wanted, the governments wanted to have an agreement which ended up with the Western Accord, whereby we ended up with the marketplace determining what the prices would be. And now we have the Liberal leader in this province wanting us to intervene and have guarantees again.
Supplementaries. Second question, Leader of the Opposition.
All right, I'd like to direct my second question to the Minister of Parks and Recreation. Mr. Speaker, on a study done, an income and employment analysis study done by Stuart Weir and Company for the Government as part of the Integrated Resources Plan process on the Castle River, I think the Minister is aware that it made clear that the best economic prospects for the area rest on recreation and tourism. My question then to the Minister is, why is the provincial government backing away from plans to create a provincial park in the South Castle area near the Waterton Park?
Well, I'm not fully familiar, Mr. Speaker, with the study. I would like to state that we're reviewing all aspects of it, and I would report if there's anything further advised at a later date.
No. Maybe I can help the Minister out, Mr. Speaker. The federal Conservative Minister of the Environment has stated that Waterton Park is one of Canada's most threatened national parks. My question to the Minister is, why then is the provincial government not cooperating with the federal government to protect the area near the north boundary of the park for future generations?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly not aware of any threats, but it's our intention as a provincial government to work with the federal government in all areas of it.
The Minister not aware of the Shell plant? That's some sort of threat to a park, I would say, Mr. Speaker. But just to follow along, Parks Canada and the U.S. National Park Service have jointly nominated Waterton and Glacier International Park to UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. My question to the Minister, what is the Minister's position regarding a personal appeal by him to the ERCB to request a suspension of their approval for the Shell Jutland well until the World Heritage Bureau and UNESCO have made a decision on this joint Canada-U.S. application?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think my personal feelings are what should be brought into this. It's what's best for all Albertans, and that's what will be done.
Supplementary question to the Minister. I was not asking his personal feelings. I'm sure he's a very warm individual. My question is, as a Minister of the Crown, would he be prepared to make that recommendation to the ERCB until this decision is made?
As a minister responsible, Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to review all aspects of it and would report back.
Supplementary member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister in charge, I'd ask a supplementary. Would he at least, if he cannot stop the Shell juggernaut from building a road, would he at least ask Shell whether they could drill the well by bringing it in by helicopter rather than putting in practically a 3-lane highway to open up the whole wilderness area?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member mentions about flying in by helicopter. She should be well aware it's feasible, practical. And I'm sure that concern will be brought to the attention of those involved.
For the supplementaries, member for West Loch Sturgeon, Leader of the Liberal Party. Main question, please.
The main question, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask through you to the Minister of Utilities. Recent reports, Mr. Minister, has cited that if Sheerness 2 and project outside of Edmonton are suspended, the savings would come in the nature of around $593 million. However, if you equate that against the added cost, the extra cost of building plants in the 1990s, they say the savings is only $6 million. Now, these are accepting the studies made by the utility companies, which admittedly may be on, but has the minister made any studies from the taxpayer's point of view, as to any savings or what savings, if any, will be made, taken into consideration from the taxpayer's point of view? They are now paying for people on welfare rolls. They're also paying for unemployment insurance. Have we put a cost-benefit analysis on it from the taxpayer's point of view rather than accepting what the utility companies have said was their difference?
Well, Mr. Speaker, two things should be pointed out. That the ERCB, in essence, judge the information that is provided to them from all parties and make a decision based on that. And as a result of that, some time ago, there was the approval for Sheerness number 1, which was officially opened on Friday last for 380 megawatts. And then there was a deferment of the Genesee project to October of 1989, and a further deferment of Sheerness number 2 and Genesee number 1 to October of 1990 and 1991 together. The information then, I guess in answer to the honourable member's question, Mr. Speaker, is that the ERCB will judge all the information provided to them by all parties and make the best decision.
Supplementary to the minister, I know what the ERCB has said, and I know what the utility companies have said. I'm looking up from the, I'd like to ask the minister, has he evaluated from the taxpayer's point of view and the cost-benefit analysis of having to pay for unemployment insurance, loss of jobs, loss of income tax to the people of Alberta by not having those plants built right now?
Mr. Speaker, I, at this particular point in time, in the short period of time that I've been involved with the ministry, have not ordered any of those particular types of studies. I'm attempting to bring myself up to date on the information that has been provided in the past. And, of course, with that plant on stream as of Friday, obviously two things have to be kept in mind, that the judgment is made by the ERCB outside of government in the interests of all parties involved, both the power companies, the consumers, and the government.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, in all due deference, I think that's a cop-out. But I would like to ask then, how far and what stage is the Genesee plant in now? How close to completion is it in values of dollars spent?
Mr. Speaker, I can't give you any more information other than the fact that Genesee number 2 was deferred from June of 1988 to October of 1989. And my understanding is, Mr. Speaker, that that plant is probably on stream for the October 1989 date.
Can the minister not tell us, outside of reading press releases put out by the utility companies, just how far along a plant is? How long would it take it to complete?
Mr. Speaker, inasmuch as that's the decision and the judgment of the City of Edmonton, it's probably better asked to the City of Edmonton.
Member for Edmonton Beverly.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Utilities, just to clarify my own mind, did I understand you to say that the development of the Genesee plant is going to proceed as on present schedule, or are there some suggestion that indeed you're going to ask the city to again delay the construction of that facility?
I'm not sure that that's a hypothetical question, Mr. Speaker. I maybe should have the question again.
Are you going to ask to go?
Well, is it the intent of the government to allow the city to proceed with the building of Genesee as per present timeframes? Or, in fact, is there some suggestion that you're going to ask them to delay it again?
Mr. Speaker, there hasn't been any change from the original suggestion to the city of some time ago, and I guess I haven't made any other adjustment to that particular time frame since my coming into office.
Member for Clover Bar, followed by the member for Calgary-McCall.
Speaker, my question is the Honourable Solicitor General and has to do with the
white elephant known as the new Fort Saskatchewan Correctional Institute. To the Minister, in light of the fact that over $27.5 million tenders have already been let, can the Minister indicate why an additional $600,000 tender was let to renovate the old institution?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of this particular tender having been let. I'm in the process of briefing myself on these particulars. I will take notice and bring it back to the member.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, can the Minister indicate, or he can also find out for us, what consultation took place between the Minister's department and the general population of the city of Fort Saskatchewan as to the site selection before the site was chosen?
Mr. Speaker, I'd have to take that on notice as well and get back to the member.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, I did give the Minister some advance notice that I'd be asking these questions, and I'd certainly appreciate if he could have all the answers the next time I ask them.
Mr. Speaker, if I may respond, the member opposite did inform me that he was going to ask me some questions relating to disposition of the land after the new facility is completed. It's always been a policy of this government to take into consideration the views of the populace in such situations, and the city is presently in negotiations with Public Works on the disposition of the said land. The previous comments were not indicated to me prior.
Member for Calgary McCall, followed by the member for Edmonton Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Minister of Advanced Education a question on behalf of the constituents of Calgary McCall and Calgary Montrose. And there has been some ongoing discussion over the last 3 or 4 years with regards to developing a satellite to the Mount Royal College in northeast Calgary. And I wonder, could the Minister indicate what the present status is of developing that satellite to Mount Royal College in the northeast of the city of Calgary to further enhance the educational needs of the young people in that area?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The matter, I'm told, has been put to the Calgary Board of Education, that is a public school board, to see if they'd be interested in proceeding with a joint development on the site of what is called the new Northeast High School. And I understand that they're going to be discussing that matter this week. The board of Mount Royal has been working on the idea of a satellite community to serve that very large growth in population that lies along the east side of the city. They presently have some branch quarters in rented space downtown, but this would be kind of a neat concept for them to move in that way.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary, I think, to the Minister of Education. Has there been any discussion with the Minister's Department regarding the joint venturing of or joint usage of the Northeast High School, which funding was announced by the former Minister of Education prior to the Board of Education making a decision, and a possible satellite to Mount Royal College? In other words, has the Minister's Department been involved with the discussion with the Board of Education, the Public Board of Education in Calgary, and an ongoing basis with this development of a satellite to the college?
Mr. Speaker, my understanding is that there have been informal discussions between the Mount Royal College and the Calgary Public School Board with respect to moving jointly on a facility in the northeast part of the city. No recommendation has come to me, and I'll certainly look at it when one does. I would note, though, that I think it's a very effective use of provincial facilities to attempt to put two facilities into one, and if that can be accomplished, I think it's a very worthy goal.
Mr. Speaker, a further supplementary. Would the Minister of Education undertake to keep members from Calgary McCall and Calgary Montrose informed of developments and make every effort to ensure that there is no slowdown in the early development of the Northeast High School by the discussions that may be ongoing with the school board and the Mount Royal College board.
Mr. Speaker, I will certainly work with the MLAs involved as we work towards the development of that facility.
Member for Edmonton, call. Supplementary.
Honorable Minister of Advanced Education. Speaking of higher education, Mr. Minister, are you or is the minister satisfied that the complaints of the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology in Calgary and the University of Calgary that the funding they receive per capita is unfairly low in relation to Edmonton, the funding of Edmonton institutions? Is the minister...
The question, your supplementary is not a supplementary to the main question. It's a separate question on its own merit. Thank you very much. It's not it. Member for Edmonton Calder, followed by the member for Olds Didsbury.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address this question to the Minister of Social Services. In answer to my question on Friday about the termination of 6 income security positions, the Minister said, I would not be familiar with a particular reduction. Yet on Thursday, the Minister stated clearly that there were no cuts in areas other than that of institutional care. Is the Minister familiar with any particular reductions, or can we take these conflicting answers to mean that the Minister doesn't know what's happening in her own department?
Mr. Speaker, you can cancel, or Mr. Speaker, please cancel my request for the supplementary answers to my questions of Friday last, because I had intended to supplement my answers. Not having seen the memo on which the questions were being based, Mr. Speaker, I felt that I should supplement today. The memo for the information of the members of the House was in response to my request to the Deputy Minister for information relating to the heavy load that was being carried by frontline staff in all regions of the province. And for the information of the honourable member, we had already instituted a hiring process in the Calgary region to supplement positions. And Mr. Speaker, for the information of all honourable members, I think that it would be useful for me to leave with the House, for all honourable members, the copy of a request for that information that was then sent to the 6 regions throughout the province. And as a matter of fact, there is no real reduction in social worker positions. They are now being carried under man-year positions. And Mr. Speaker, this really gets into a detailed discussion that I'm sure that we will have while debating estimates. But in order that the Department of Social Services be flexible to their approach with a variance of caseloads as they can occur over the year, and also as a result of our automation of the Millwoods District Office here in the Edmonton region, we felt that the same approach should be taken by utilizing man-year offices, so that as we introduce new technology, and I mentioned that in my speech on Wednesday last, where I raised concern about the load being carried by our frontline positions, and as a matter of fact said that we would have to introduce new technology to supplement the efforts that are being made there. And so as we assess that new technology, Mr. Speaker, we will utilize man-year positions in order that we can continue to deliver the service to the people.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. The Minister stated that there's a hiring process going on right now in Calgary, and my question is this. Is there a hiring process being conducted at the moment in the Edmonton region?
Mr. Speaker, I haven't formally received the final memo that will come from the Edmonton region in terms of the final assessment. There's been an assessment, and obviously the honourable member knows, from the regional office. There is other information that will come from central departmental staff, and when I have received that, and if it indicates, as I well believe it may, as we have seen in the Calgary region, that more positions are needed, Mr. Speaker, those positions will be filled.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Well, the minister had stated on at least 3 times on Friday that she has instructed additional income security staff be hired. This doesn't seem to match with the memo, and I'm wondering when did the minister direct the additional staff that they be hired?
Mr. Speaker, I don't remember the precise date, but the direction for the hiring of staff came basically from the information that we were gleaning from our working relationship with the Calgary Food Bank, the kind of information that they were providing to us, and it was obvious that we needed more frontline staff to handle the situation. And whatever information comes out of our other 5 regions, Mr. Speaker, will be dealt with accordingly.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. At the very least, then, will the 6 income security positions lost in Edmonton in April be restored due to the minister's instructions?
Mr. Speaker, those positions are not lost. Those positions are now classified under the man-year area, and I'd be pleased to be able to discuss that when discussing the estimates in the House.
Supplementary, the member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister, given all the introduction of new technology and the jiggery-pokery of man-years, does this mean that the income security workers' caseload will increase, decrease, or stay the same?
Mr. Speaker, it is my hope that the caseload that is held directly by the income security social workers. There are a number of workers who are involved in the processing of individual applications, but those who relate directly and need to have discussions with the applicants, Mr. Speaker, I would hope to have the caseload reduced.
Member for Olds Didsbury, followed by the member for Calgary Mountain View.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question to our Minister of Agriculture. Could the minister indicate to us if he is concerned about the recently announced takeover of palm dairies by the consortium of the 4 Western Milk Producers Co-op?
Mr. Speaker, as honourable members are probably aware, if there was any concern as it related to this takeover, it would fall under federal jurisdiction and under the Federal Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. I should share with the honourable member that hopefully this acquisition will give a higher priority to the dairy industry within the province of Alberta.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Could the minister indicate just what direct impact he feels this will have on all Albertans?
Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member for Olds Didsbury, as much as I indicated earlier, we're hopeful that it will make Alberta the focal point for our dairy industry because it is going to have a higher impact upon this province itself.
Member for Calgary Mountain View, followed by the member for Bow Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question this afternoon is to the Premier. Last week, the Premier of Saskatchewan announced the establishment of a 3-person commission to hear public views on trade with the United States. And his position, which up until now, as you know, has been as a staunch advocate of bilateral trade with the United States, he says that position will be affected by what he hears from people in his province. Does the Premier have any similar plan to seek the input of Albertans on the costs and benefits of bilateral trade with the United States?
Mr. Speaker, I noticed that report and discussed it briefly with the Premier of Saskatchewan. It's an interesting move he's making there, and it's something that should be perhaps considered, and I'll certainly be thinking about it.
Mr. Speaker, I'm encouraged by that answer from the Premier, and I'm wondering if he could give this Assembly an indication when the period of consideration would be completed and we'd know whether we would have such a commission here in Alberta or not.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'd certainly want to consider it. I don't know that there aren't other alternatives as well. I'll think of all of those, discuss them with my colleagues, and as soon as there's a decision that is made, I'd be happy to mention it here in the House.
Before the talk,
Mr. Speaker, as a supplementary, I know that we're all quite concerned about these negotiations and that it's taking this country in one of the most crucial directions it's ever been taken. Has this government contracted to have any studies done or commissioned any studies which might analyze the impact on Alberta of a bilateral trade agreement with the United States?
Mr. Speaker, there are really a lot of studies on the impact of trade. There have been documents sent to us that have been completed by a variety of organizations, other governments, federal government. There's quite an inventory, and it might be helpful to compile that inventory for members of the legislature, and then perhaps any member could receive those that can be distributed.
Final supplementary, and that is whether the Premier would indicate to this House to what extent those studies have been undertaken by this government, and to what extent they indicate that bilateral trade agreements with the United States is going to hurt the economy of this province.
I didn't get the final part of his question.
To what extent have those studies been done by the provincial government itself, and to what extent do those studies done by the provincial government indicate a negative impact on the economy of this province from bilateral trade agreements with the United States?
Mr. Speaker, I think it'd be better that we see which ones can be made available to the members, and then in many cases it's your own judgment. It may seem clearer than others, but in many cases I think it's your own judgment as to whether you think they're beneficial or not. As far as how many have been carried out by the Alberta government, I'd certainly, in looking and preparing an inventory of studies, we would note how many were carried out by our government, and I'd be interested in that myself. I don't keep that figure in my head.
Supplementary member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Mr. Premier, in light of the government's announced dedication to freedom of information, might the Premier tell the House why all studies would not be made available to this House, particularly in light of the fact that the government refused to accept delivery of some of the federal studies as a result of the deletion of certain portions of those studies?
Mr. Speaker, there are certain studies carried out which reflect on the competitive nature of industries or companies within industries, and I think in those cases it's usually courtesy not to make those matters public.
Member for Bow Valley, followed by the member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture, and it concerns imports of beef from the European Economic Community. Earlier this year, there was a countervail put on beef that was imported from Europe. Lately, they've been having hearings whether this countervail should continue. I wonder if the Minister could tell us what status the countervail is on European imported beef at present.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the honourable member for Bow Valley. As the honourable member is aware, an initiation such as this has to be started by the individual commodity group itself. They did appear before the Canadian Import Tribunal, and the Canadian Import Tribunal did indicate that they had a cause for complaint. And after it was proven they did have a cause for complaint, they are now presently hearing as to whether any actual damage is done, and the Canadian Import Tribunal will be ruling prior to July the 25th as it relates to the import of beef into Canada from the European Economic Community.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. At the present time, are we importing a significant amount of beef from the European Economic Community?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have those specific figures at my fingertips, but I can share with the honourable member that the Deputy Minister at the federal level of revenue had indicated that the subsidy on this beef that was coming into Canada was in the vicinity of 60%. And with those figures in mind, it is hopeful that the Canadian Import Tribunal will rule is such that there is a sufficient subsidy on this beef that has a detrimental impact on our Canadian cattle industry.
Member for Edmonton Goldbar, followed by the member for Edmonton Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Labour. Alberta's minimum wage is now the second lowest in Canada, Mr. Minister. Is the government giving any consideration to increasing the minimum wage from $3.80 an hour?
Not at this time, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, does the government have any studies or information on the numbers of Albertans working at this wage by age, gender, and family size?
Mr. Speaker, in general, many people who work at the minimum wage are working in the service industries, tourism industries. Many of those jobs are part-time, they are supplementary income, and they also function as an entry point for young people to get jobs and get experience in the workforce.
Supplementary? Don't ask me the question, please.
Mr. Speaker, another question. I take it the answer to my second question is no, Mr. Minister. The next supplementary, Mr. Speaker, is the poverty line for a family of four in Canada is at $20,020. Now, Mr. Speaker, even if we allowed a 50% margin in that, how does the minister think a family of four could live on $7,600 per annum, less than half of the poverty line in this province of Alberta?
You're asking the minister to express an opinion, and that's not within the framework of the question period. Perhaps you'd like to rephrase your question.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister, do we have any idea, do we have any data on how people in Alberta are supporting families at $7,600 per annum?
Mr. Speaker, I already indicated that by and large the people on the minimum wage are not supporting a family, and it's not the sole income of the family in most cases.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister, has the government done any analysis of whether or not this level of minimum wage is a disincentive to work?
Mr. Speaker, I would be getting into opinion as well if I was to answer that question.
Supplementary, member for Edmonton Belmont.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Manpower. Can the Minister of Manpower explain why in some of the programs that are sponsored by his department that those people who work in the private sector are paid $3.80 an hour, while in the same program those who work in the public sector are paid $5.50 an hour, specifically STEP?
I'm not sure exactly of the point the member's making, Mr. Speaker, but I would say that that in terms of minimum wage, the lower the minimum wage in a lot of cases means fuller employment. And a lot of times, if we are to raise the minimum wage, it may jeopardize some of those jobs that are at the present minimum wage in this province.
Member for Edmonton Kingsway, followed by the member for Redwater Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs or to the Treasurer, because both of them have joint responsibility for this area. Many Albertans are concerned about a series of extensions provided to Northwest Trust and Heritage Trust on the requirement that they file annual financial statements. Has the minister held any meetings, has either minister held any meetings with officials of these companies to ascertain what the government could do to help?
Mr. Speaker, first let me deal with the question of Heritage Trust Company, the savings and loan company in the city of Edmonton. You will note, Mr. Speaker, that the province has already indicated that it would fully back the deposits in the case of the Heritage Savings Company, and therefore any extensions which may have been required to allow them to update their financial statements are a matter of course, and of course would not have any implications for the depositors. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, with respect to Northwest Trust, there has been an application made before the Securities Exchange Commission to have the extension of the deadline approved, And as of the House time today, I have no other knowledge as to whether or not the Securities Exchange Commission, a group operating in a quasi-judicial manner, has come to any conclusion with respect to that request from the company.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. The depositors may be protected, but the next question is geared to the taxpayers. The province has guaranteed deposits of Heritage Trust and has deposited $85 million of Treasury Branch funds in Northwest Trust. What steps has the minister taken to protect the tax dollars which are at stake here?
Mr. Speaker, the province of Alberta, of course, takes all steps to protect its investment at all times.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. A rather cursory answer for the taxpayers, I'm sure. Will the minister assure the Assembly that the tax dollars involved are quite secure and that the filing of extensions are merely bureaucratic in nature?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I tried to indicate to the member, the reason for the extension, of course, is not before the government, it's before the Securities and Exchange Commission, and it's up to them to judge as to whether or not they will allow the extension. That, of course, is a commission made up and provided for in our legislation, which, as I noted, operates on a quasi-judicial basis without much, if any, direction from government.
Final supplementary. Does the government intend to give the Heritage Trust further extension on the time they have to raise the $6 million to qualify for the government's $10 million rescue package?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I attempted to indicate, in the case of the Heritage Trust Company, we have already indemnified the depositors, and we're looking for a way, along with the owners of that company, for they and the private sector to come to some agreement to inject more capital into that corporation. And that process is now underway, as is well understood by all the citizens of Alberta, and has been well reported in this Assembly.
Member for Edmonton, Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary to the Provincial Treasurer. Mr. Speaker, it's not just Heritage Trust and Northwest Trust. It's CCB, Northlands Bank, it's Daw Mortgage, Tower Mortgage, Ram Mortgage. It's 1/3 of the credit unions. It's Financial Trust Co., which has left this province. And you're right, Mr. Speaker, it's an awfully long list, and I can't go on with it. I understand that.
Please, honourable member, ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister please indicate what steps he is taking to develop and nurture a strong regional financial industry for Alberta, which is so vital for a strong, diversified economy in this province?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, the government's position has been outlined on several occasions with respect to a sub-paper under the white paper, which did in fact deal specifically with that area of enhancing the financial infrastructure of this province, and that is still a statement of this government, which does in fact speak to that initiative and to that objective. But I might go on to say, Mr. Speaker, that there are a variety of programs which in fact are attempting to assist the private sector to establish the financial infrastructure in this province. For example, this government has taken the initiative to establish the Alberta venture capital industry by taking initiative through the Heritage Fund to establish VenCap equities, to put in place small business equity corporations to attract and to muster private sector investment on the private sector side. We have gone on to adjust the tax system to allow the manufacturing sector in particular to have zero tax breaks and provide the lowest corporate tax in this country. And we also use discretionary power of the government to enhance and to expand a variety of programs to take on that very interest. We know that the strength is in this province in the private sector. We intend to maintain it and to provide whatever assistance necessary to do just that.
Member for Redwater Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, there have been concerns raised in the farm community with regards to the deadlines for the Alberta Farm Fertilizer Price Protection Program. Could the Minister outline what extensions, if any, have been made to this program?
Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member from Redwater Andrew, maybe I could indicate at the outset that this program, even though there has been some concern expressed to it, has been very well received by our farming population. In fact, some 29,000 farmers have applied for funding under this to some $2.2 million. The plan was introduced on April the 1st of '85. It runs from August 1st, '84 to July the 31st, '86, and the application deadline has been extended to January 31st, 1987.
Supplementary. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, could he indicate if this program would be continued in the future?
Mr. Speaker, as is the case with all our programs, they are under constant review, and we are presently assessing this program, and at the appropriate time we will indicate as to whether it is going to be continued or not.
Time for question period has expired, and we have two ministers who would like to supplement questions as taken on notice the other day. First, the Minister of Energy.
Well, Mr. Speaker, on Wednesday, June the 18th, the honourable member from Forest Lawn raised a question with regard to a recommendation from the National Energy Board in a hearing related to availability of services on the Trans-Canada pipeline system. The question related as to why the Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission had taken a certain position in those hearings. At those hearings, there were essentially two distinct points of view. One, that all gas producers should share equally in the carrying of interest charges on what was referred to as a top gas agreement. There were those who said that new customers should not share in those interest charges, and the recommendation from the National Energy Board was down the middle for partial sharing. The reason the Petroleum Marketing Commission took their position, and it was an Alberta government position as well, relates to a number of factors, one of which is that the take-or-pay provisions of gas contracts were considered necessary to assure a long-term gas supply and provide financial backstopping for the construction of the pipeline a number of years ago. And secondly, the vast majority of Alberta producers participate in the Trans-Canada pipeline sales either directly or indirectly. So the position was essentially representing the views of the producers in this province. In general, it was that the take-or-pay problem was a system problem which was impairing the Trans-Canada pipeline system financially. The producers agreed under the top gas agreement to bear the interest costs of the loans in return for assurances of a market. Those were contracts that were predicated upon a regulated system, but in a deregulated system we have a different picture now. The position being that the non-system gas should not enjoy the benefits which resulted from these arrangements without sharing in those costs.
The Minister of Forestry, Lands and Wildlife.
Mr. Speaker, the member from Calgary-Buffalo asked two questions taken by my colleague as noticed last Thursday in my absence. The first was stated that the Eastern Slopes policy of the government in 1977 designated the very site of the proposed shell well for prime protection, which meant no drilling or other heavy industrial activities. And his question was, what was the public interest which impelled the change in the Eastern Slopes policy in 1984? I think this needs clarification. The question presumes that 1984 Eastern Slopes policy rezoned the area in question. It did not. Under both the 77 and the 1984 Eastern Slopes policy, provision was made to undertake zoning changes through the mechanism of sub-regional integrated resource plans. The sub-regional plans supersede the Eastern Slopes policies in respect to land use decision. Such plans are based on full public involvement, and I can go on to say, Mr. Speaker, that they're viewed by this process is viewed as one of the best in Canada's planning process. More specifically, the Castle River Sub-Regional Integrated Resource Plan, approved in 1985, provides more detailed planning and zoning for the area. And under this plan, extensive public input was received on the plan through three major public forums in Lethbridge, Crow's Nest Pass, and Pincher Creek, as well as approximately 12 meetings with other interested groups. The information received from the public meetings were reviewed and assessed before the Integrated Resource Plan was finalized. With reference to the second question, which relates to the same well, with regards to asking for a delay, I would say the answer is no. And as I mentioned earlier, in my previous answer, massive public input was received in the Castle River Subregional Plan prior to the approval of that plan. More recently, in regard to Shell's license application, the Energy Resources Conservation Board conducted 4 days of public hearings, and very stringent conditions were attached to the well license approval.
Might we revert briefly to the introduction of special guests?
Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today, through you to the members of this Assembly, 62 grade 9 students from Stettler Junior High School, along with their teachers, V. Lindstrand, Dawn Anderson, G. Gamble, Larry Ambury, and drivers F. Lamoureux and W. Hallett. They have come here today all the way from beautiful downtown Stettler, the heart of Alberta. I would ask if they would rise in the members' gallery and receive the warm welcome of this House.
Orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the Assembly resolve itself into Committee of the Whole in order to consider Bill number 6.
Having heard the motion by the Honourable Government House Leader, would those in favour of the motion please